So it turned out that the person that kept sneaking into my bedroom might have been the ghost of my Uncle Ron. I then heard footsteps coming from the living room. I then thought it sounded like the footsteps walking right up to me, yet I couldn't see anyone coming at me. I was starting to wonder if this was a haunting. Hello and welcome to Our Family's True Tales of the Supernatural. This is a show where I'll talk about paranormal activity my family and I have witnessed. I'm going to be sharing a couple of stories on today's episode. Both of these stories have a lot of meaning to me personally. So before we get started, please remember to click like, share, and subscribe, or follow if you're on Rumble. Feel free to tell me what you like about the show in the comments section, and feel free to let your friends know about the show as well. As for now, let's get started with our first story. This first story starts out with the tragic death of my uncle, who I'll call Ron. That's not his real name, but that's who I'll call him for this story to give his family privacy. My family found out that my uncle Ron had passed away due to a tragic set of circumstances. So our family made plans to travel to my aunt's house so we could attend the funeral. The next morning, we traveled out of town to another part of the United States to get to my Aunt Cheryl's house. We arrived at my aunt's house that evening, and my mom gave Aunt Cheryl a big hug, and they talked for a while after that. We all ate a meal together and talked throughout the evening. We found out the details of the situation and what had happened. It was tragic and heartbreaking to hear about it. Yet later that night, my parents took their suitcases to the basement bedroom so they could sleep there for the night. I took my suitcase and a couple of bags of my supplies to a side bedroom where I could sleep for the night. I left my door a bit ajar so the hallway nightlight could light the way in case I had to use the restroom in the middle of the night. I noticed that my parents left some of their supplies in plastic bags in my room as well. We were all tired from all the events of the day and the emotional stress of it all, so we all got to sleep quick that night, and we slept quite sound most of the night. Somewhere in the early morning hours, around 4 or 5 a.m., I heard a noise in my room. It sounded like someone was going through our plastic bags of our stuff. I thought it might be my parents looking for some of their stuff or my aunt's dog sniffing the bags. So I just went back to sleep. About a half hour later, I heard someone come in my room again and make noise as if they were messing with the plastic bags of our stuff. I thought it might be my parents looking for some of their stuff or my aunt's dog sniffing the bags. I opened my eyes to see who it was, but it seemed like they ran out of the room so fast that I didn't even see who it was. I didn't really think much of it at the time, so I went back to sleep again. About another half hour later, the same type of noise woke me up again. I opened my eyes to see who it was, and it appeared that the person made a quick attempt to leave the room in a hurry. As I lifted my head to see who it was, I thought I saw a guy in a light-colored shirt leave the room through the doorway. I thought it was either my dad, a cousin, or a cousin's spouse or boyfriend, maybe. I thought it must have been my dad who might have been looking for some of his luggage or maybe a shaving kit. I went back to sleep since it seemed like the sun hadn't come up at the time, and I was still tired, so I wanted to get some more sleep. A short time later, I woke up and walked out to the living room to wait for my parents to get up in the morning. I wanted to check with my parents so we could figure out how to get some breakfast to eat and how to go about our daily activities that day. A while later, my parents came up from the basement and I asked if they had been in my room in the night. I wanted to help them find their luggage or whatever it was that they were looking for. They mentioned that they didn't come in there. I told them about the noise I heard and that I saw someone walk out of the room. I later asked my Aunt Cheryl and my cousin Linda about the situation, and they said it wasn't them. My cousin also mentioned that her boyfriend hadn't even come over that morning, so it couldn't have been that guy either. My Aunt Cheryl also told me that she had the dog locked in her bedroom that night, so it couldn't have been the dog coming out and sniffing the bags either. My Aunt Cheryl noticed that it sounded like something that my Uncle Ron would do, as if he was looking for something. She said it seemed exactly like Uncle Ron. Then we all remembered Uncle Ron had passed away, and we were supposed to go to the funeral that day. So it couldn't have been Uncle Ron, or could it? I then remembered that the guy I had seen walk out of the room had the exact same height and build as Uncle Ron. No one else that had been in the house came close to the slim build and his slightly tall height. The only person who looked like the guy I had seen walking out of my bedroom was Uncle Ron. So it turned out that the person that kept sneaking into my bedroom might have been the ghost of my Uncle Ron. A short time later, I wrote down the circumstances of what had happened and what I had seen so I could keep a record of it. I typed it on my computer a few days later after the funeral that week. This is a story about a situation that baffled me, yet it taught me lessons on how to think critically to make sure I have evidence to prove whether a situation is a haunting or not. I call this story A Ghostly Night. A few years ago, when I was a young man, I purchased a mobile home from my uncle and had it moved to my parents' property. I finally had my own place where I could live on my own. We set up the mobile home in the back of my parents' property and I lived in there. A short time after I moved in, I heard a strange noise that woke me up in the middle of the night. I heard the distinct sound of footsteps walking around in my house. I paused a moment to make sure I was hearing what I thought I was hearing. I noticed that it sure did sound like footsteps. I got out of bed and tried to remain as quiet as I could be, and I walked to my bedroom door to listen. I heard what seemed like footsteps walking all around in the house. It seemed like the footsteps were walking back and forth from one end of the mobile home to the other. I turned my doorknob with silent ease, and opened the door a tiny bit so I could peek into the hallway. I didn't see anything at first, but tried to look through the low light into the living room. I couldn't see much, but I could still hear the footsteps that sounded as if they were walking back and forth through the house. I stood there watching for a moment, but still didn't see anyone there. Yet I still heard what seemed like footsteps walking around in the house. The footsteps didn't come close to me, so I made a slow movement to open the door to walk into the hallway. I kept my fist clenched in case there was a fight. I then made a slow movement with my feet to step out into the hallway. I was a bit slumped over, holding my fists in front of me in case there was a fight with somebody who had broken into the house. Yet I stepped forward into the darkness. The footsteps seemed to stop for a few seconds, and I tried to look into the dimly lit area, but I couldn't see anyone. I turned to my right and looked into the bathroom and didn't see anyone there. I stepped further down the hallway and into the kitchen area. I looked around and I could see into the living room, but I still didn't see anyone. I turned on the kitchen light, which lit up most of the living room as well, but I didn't see anyone or hear any footsteps. I took a few more steps into the living room and looked around a few things, but still didn't see anyone. I even looked into the next room and didn't see anyone there either. I then thought I heard footsteps come up from behind me, so I made a quick turn while holding my fists up in the air. I was ready for a fight because I was certain that someone was coming up behind me to attack me. Yet as I turned, I didn't see anyone there. I felt confused because I was certain that I heard footsteps approaching me from behind. I then thought I heard footsteps in the bathroom, so I tiptoed over to check out the bathroom once again. As I got to the bathroom, I made a slow move to peek around the edge of the doorway. I looked around the room, but didn't see anyone there. I stepped into the room, went to look behind the shower curtain and behind the door, but I didn't see anyone there either. I was starting to wonder if this was a haunting, but I had just moved this mobile home to this location, so there couldn't have been any prior history with a haunting unless someone had been killed that I didn't know about on the property and maybe their body was buried there somewhere. I then thought I heard footsteps in the kitchen again, so I made a quick move to go to the kitchen again. As I got there, once again, I didn't see anyone, and I started to feel confused again about what was going on. I couldn't figure it out. I then heard footsteps coming from the living room, and I held my fists in front of me in case I would need to defend myself. Yet I couldn't see anyone coming at me, so I didn't know what to think. I then thought it sounded like the footsteps walking right up to me, pass through me, and keep walking to the bathroom. I turned as the footsteps seemed to keep going to the bathroom. I was now thinking this must be a haunting, and I didn't know what to do about it. I then thought I saw the bathroom door start to move back and forth on its own. I figured This had to be someone in there. I walked over to the doorway to see what was going on and saw it continue to move on its own. I looked in the bathroom and saw no one, and I looked through the opening near the hinges and saw no one behind the door. I walked into the bathroom and looked around and didn't see anyone. I was certain that this must be some type of haunting. I then looked down and noticed something at the bottom of the bathroom door. I saw a set of my sneakers, or tennis shoes, that were propped against the door on each side. I then remembered that I had opened the window earlier that night and the wind kept slamming the door shut. So I propped my shoes, one on each side of the door, so it wouldn't get slammed shut or slam against the wall. I then heard some wind blowing through the window and saw the door move once again. I then saw that it was the wind that had been moving the door. I then noticed that as the door moved in the wind, my shoes would take turns flopping down. I felt a bit foolish for forgetting that I propped the door open with my shoes and for thinking it was a haunting. At least I had figured out what was making the noise and that it was only the wind. I breathed a slight sigh of relief that there wasn't any real problem at all. I then heard a really loud noise that startled me. It sounded like a really loud meow from a monstrous-sized cat. I flinched and turned to the window to see what it was. My heart was pounding hard, but I realized it was only a sudden gust of wind that was howling through the window. I then got a bit flustered with myself and reached over to shut the window and put a stop to the problem. I felt foolish once again for getting my emotions all worked up for nothing. The whole thing had only been my imagination running wild with me. It turned out that it was only the wind the whole time. It wasn't a ghostly night, but was only my imagination giving me a ghastly fright. It was more ghastly than ghostly. At least no one had broken in and it wasn't a wild animal like a bear or anything like that. It took a while for my heart to slow down, but I eventually went back to sleep for the night. This is why I often try to see if any of the strange occurrences I see can be explained by normal things. So this is why I often try to debunk the things I see or experience. There have been other things I've seen where I know I saw paranormal activity for certain. I've seen apparitions and things move on their own on other occasions. I even had a few things happen where there are other witnesses standing right beside me at the time. I'll talk about some of those in other episodes in the future. Our time is up for now, so I'll say farewell for now, and I hope to see you in the next episode. Feel free to leave any comments on what you liked about the show or any paranormal occurrences that you've witnessed. I'd like to hear about them. So for now, I'll just say, see you later.